Hey guys, Kevin here, Life22. So we are reviewing today the council meeting from last Tuesday, which was September 21st. And this will put us up to date. Apologies again, we still haven't heard from our guest the other night, no call, no show. So maybe we'll get him on the show, maybe we won't. Then, oh well, right? We are going to start making plans for more guests on the show though, because I know that you guys are getting bored of Kevin's harangues. And then, so this one was a spicy one. This is a good one. This put us in line so that we can actually go through and have our meeting. What meeting were we going to do? Oh, we are going to do the... Checking my audio. Sorry, gang. We were going to do the... Oh, yeah. We got a Common Council meeting this coming Tuesday. So I have a class, and it makes me unavailable Tuesdays and Thursdays for a while. So I will be missing it, but I hopefully will be able to watch it before I go to bed, make notes, and then Wednesday evening we can get that reviewed, and we can be on a regular schedule for just doing those, and then saving like my other free nights to get guests on the show and things like that. So that's coming up. And we did forget to change the date. Boom, done. Look at that. All right. So, anyways, getting started. So we're gonna check it out here. Common Council meeting, 2021. They're all ready.
We'll call to order, Public Safety Committee, Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. Let the record show all committee members are present, with the exception of Olean Gonzalez. Approval of minutes of the previous committee meeting, Tuesday, September 7th. I'd like to make a motion.
Committee meetings, and about 50 seconds in, which we're almost there, they talk about
North 4th Street.
left turn signal on Wayne to 4th. So this is a controversial issue coming up here.
Complaining that are coming east on Wayne Street, trying to turn out to North 4th Street. They have to wait 2 or 3 cycles at the red light because with the school starting now, there's so much traffic going both ways. So what they're asking for is if we could install a left turn signal to give the cars heading east a chance to turn onto North 4th Street to wake up somebody congestion down there. And that won't have to work 24/7, and we don't have to work, I would assume, during school.
Dave asked me if I was going to critique him because I spoke with him not too long ago, and he goes, "Hey, you've been seeing your critiques and blah blah blah." He goes, you don't critique me too much, and so I'm going to critique him because this is, and it's not going to be harsh. It's just going to be like a move like this is like a Facebook. It's a Facebook. It's one of those ones you get like I want to put no parking on this side of the street because one constituent came to me. Dave's been on long enough to know that and Dave's style is anytime he gets a complaint, he brings it to the council directly. Like he doesn't really do any, typically he doesn't do a lot of homework until like the night of the meeting, and he just tells them what it is. And maybe that's how they did it in the 90s. And this is not a disparaging critique, Dave. I just everybody's a little different. I used to listen to the one neighbor, and then I would take that and go to like the DPW director, the police chief, the fire chief, whoever was involved with like traffic issues, because all of them have a say. Obviously, DPW has big weight in it. Police, for enforcement purposes, and then fire a little bit more for ambulance in and outs, and calls. But for the most part, I send it to that trifecta, and then I would then talk to some of the other neighbors. And what would happen is that like none of the other neighbors wanted to get behind it, usually, most of the time. And at which point you have to go to the original guy, but like, listen, I listened to your complaint, I talked to all the neighbors, and I sent some information to DPW and fire and police, and then they came back with blah, and your decision was reviewed, and I'm not going to present it to the council. And there was a lot of times that I would just not present stuff to the council. Sometimes I would present stuff to the council in, well, we're waiting on the police chief, but fire, DPW have gotten back to us, and, none of the neighbors were home, and we're just going to see what everybody else's thoughts are. We're waiting out, we left my business card at neighbors. And sometimes, I'd go off a little half-cocked, but, Dave brings everything to the council. But for this, I think that he's going to get a lot of flack from left turn signal on Wayne and 4th. No, that's not what it is. I think I don't know. I still think he's going to get some flack for it, because anytime you change traffic patterns, it's like, it's a no. And so, in addition to just having a street light, it says green, you go, and if you have the opportunity to take a left and you're in the left turn signal lane, like, you could, now you're mandating traffic stop a little more. I think that by getting those couple people that want to take a left on a 4th to go down 4th and give them their own spot, I think you're going to end up having a greater delay for the mass amount of traffic that you flow through that area. So, but that's just me. And then anytime there's change in traffic patterns, Facebook erupts with like this ungodly noise. So.
I just want to prompt it with, like a signal change is a very complicated thing. So if we were to explore this idea, I think we will not start with the study. I spoke to the police chief about that.
100% volume.
Whether it's
100% volume. What did I do? Turn this down.
Yeah, for me to make a change like
He's
this,
really
I gotta have to have a lot of engineering backup to justify it. I'd known about this previously. David kind of tipped me off. I think there's a lot to this.
They go for like 9 minutes talking about like, well, should we put that traffic device that the police department has and blah blah blah. And the police chief's like, is there a speeding issue? And they, no, we want to do a traffic study. Like it's not a person. You can't study traffic. Like it'll give you some data for speeds, and then you can set parameters based on the data it collects.
Just to keep in mind is,
which is not left-hand turns.
As soon as that advanced street ended, I think you would want to activate that same motion with a red arrow.
So I mean, this is kind of a moot discussion. I mean, they're going to do some research. I'm sure we'll talk about it again in the future. And they're literally just going back and forth on it until about 9 minutes and 30 seconds in.
So it's probably been in the meetings.
So it's okay.
When Jason
Anything else on that discussion?
I'm just curious to throw it out there what a roundabout at that intersection tends to do.
We do not want a roundabout.
Well,
That was- it's almost like Kevin was back on the
keeps
council.
traffic moving. I would think you turn left faster out of a roundabout than you would out of a stop sign.
Alderman
We'll leave
Page.
the light the way it is.
Everybody needs a little levity. Dave Anastasia also hates with a passion roundabouts. I think I've mentioned this in a previous meeting. He is at the culmination of all the people on Facebook that hate the roundabouts. Screw the roundabouts. That's Dave. Dave hates the roundabouts. He is like a come to life Facebook comment about roundabouts. So for Jason to pick up on that and play with it, I think that was a great. Levity is really like they call them. They used to be called the Comedy Council prior to my my tenure on the council. But I think that the reason they called them the Comedy Council is because they were a joke. And I didn't watch the council meetings at that point. I was kind of new to politics. I was green. I was young and wet behind the ears, and we had comedy when I was there. Because you need levity. You can't have all these people just getting angry and yelling at each other and changing laws and all this other stuff. I think you needed to have a little levity, and that's what I try to provide, as well as common sense and good decisions. You need a good bouquet of all that stuff, and people would forget that. And I just sending out the reminders there. But that was good. Let's see what Linda has to say.
It's about traffic. I've had a couple people call me about the timing of the signal at Delavan and Route 16. People that are trying to walk across or walk their bikes across, because remember, it's a 4-lane highway. So So they just wondered if we could lengthen the time so they can get
So
across.
they went from a
because they're
PL to
finding
Linda going on
they're
a.
still in the
She does this
crosswalk.
too. She brings up her complaints during council meetings and committee
So
meetings,
if we could just look at that
without
time
putting it
there
like.
at Delavan
At least put in a
and
formal
16th.
discussion, or like, hey, be late to the table and everything's printed already, and be like, hey guys, I guess I'm on the, give somebody a heads up.
Okay, it was just a question that a couple residents had.
Route 16 crossings.
All right, so any more questions on the left turn signal for Wayne Street North 4th? We'll move on. There's another discussion that was brought to our attention yesterday. It's not on the agenda, but this one is for North 4th between Coleman and Water Street.
That's me again. I got a complaint over the weekend from a couple constituents that live down on North 4th Street, saying that there's people coming from basically the railroad tracks all the way to Water Street. There's no stop sign in between. It's probably a 3/4 mile stretch. And they said that cars are speeding down that street, going both directions. And he said his kid almost.
So between 4th and River,
installed. So I didn't put a PL
So-
on yet for the sign, but I was gonna ask the chief if he.
You don't put it. All right, so I do have to, like,
Actually, if there are speeders on North
I'm gonna stop. Dave, you're on the chopping block. Sorry, Dave. So Chief Richardson there has a device. He sets it up. He's got a couple different devices, and some of them are like notification devices. Some of them will track speed and notify, and some of them are silent track speed. And with these devices, they can kind of get a good idea of traffic flow, how many cars are passing, how fast cars are passing, things like that. And there's certain parameters in which we can gather data. You're going to get false positives knocked out and false negatives knocked out, which means if a car turns left before, they catch you on the first part, but they miss you on the second interval, they just eliminate your data, like turn signals. So that could be one parameter. I guess you could set it up for Dave's thing, but I just think it's a lot of... And I don't know how the device works. Oh, man, I'm tired. Anyways, I don't know how the device works itself, but I know what I've been presented with, and I know different parameters that I know that it can do. But your first step is not to jump the gun and go to a traffic signal, like a stop sign. A stop sign will end up I think Director Ring points this out many a time. You don't put up a stop sign unless you absolutely have to, and there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that it's necessary. Because if you put up a stop sign and it is not necessary to get a stop sign, you will you can't take it away, right? Like, so you put up a stop sign, everybody starts stopping for it, then you remove it, and then people stop, right? Like, and they keep stopping, and other people that know it's not there just blow through it, or you know what I mean. It just causes a lot of harm, right? Like just having, or people don't know it's there and they just blow through it, and there's clearly a stop sign and some pedestrian walks and you smoke a pedestrian. Just it's bad juju to do stuff like that. So your first step should not be to reduce speed, and a lot of people. Or to put a stop sign up to reduce speed, maybe a lower speed sign, maybe you just, and the police department's really good at this. You get a complaint, you just go post it out for a while. You just send a couple patrols down that way, give out a couple tickets, send some messages, and people are like, oh shit, I shouldn't go down there and speed, right? Like, oh, I got to catch myself. I just got a ticket. Everybody's mad. But then again, you got the people in their houses that think everybody's speeding, and these devices are helpful because it turns out like 99% of the time, there's like almost no speeders. Like you get like one anomaly at like 2 a.m. because they'll track time and stuff too. So it'll be like 2 a.m. some guy goes 70 down there. Like some jerk off that just sets off the entire bell curve. And then you get a bunch of people that are going like 10 miles an hour because they're like, they probably shouldn't be driving. And that's kind of what, that's what you get with these things. But a stop sign isn't the fastest.
Probably Tuesday we'll put it up on North 4th Street.
So he's going to put that thing down there
And
Tuesday.
one on Wayne Street after that.
No, Wayne Street's fine. There's no speeding down
All right, yeah, we'll take care of that.
So we'll proceed on to...
I don't know if it was,
Sorry, John. Sorry, John. All right. 4 minutes, 14 minutes, 15 seconds.
There's just one, there's my personal comment.
Okay.
Driving here to the meeting tonight,
Mhm.
I noticed there by the railroad tracks, and that happens to be my ward also, down going towards CBS, that I'm hoping now that they cut the median, all those
Yep,
weeds
they did
that
weed
were
whack
there,
the median.
it looks so much better. You can see it
He
across the
wants it
street
mowed,
now,
that's
the
all.
weeds aren't there.
A lot of people do.
It's
It's a
something to do with
there's
that.
another
But I'm
Facebook
hoping that
back and
they
forth
stop
argument
it
that's been
right
happening
from
forever.
CBS. So I'm hoping
A lot of
that
our grants
if
are
Bob
like
did it,
in
he will do the rest
perpetuity
of the way down
to have rain gardens and wildflowers or something like that. You got to look back at what it says, but some of them are rain gardens. You cannot eliminate the plants from there because it's not a rain garden anymore. At which point we would have extreme high payback on certain. Like you can't promise to put something in because I know that governments break promises, but here's what happens when you really break promises and the state wants to take you to task. They'll make you pay back every dollar. Like that's what happens. You promise to do something like back in the day,
All right, yeah, I
meant
drove by
like
this
it
morning.
ended in death, right? Like there was like you go back and forth, right? Like you broke a promise, sir. I'm going to challenge you to a duel, and I'm a better dueler, and then I turn and bang. You know what I mean? Like that's what happens. Promises got to be worth something. If your word's worth nothing, it's worth nothing. Like it's there's no point in giving your word other than to be deceitful. At which point, the old school method was to duel it out. And
We're getting there, we made a lot of progress, to be honest. I think that is the last stretch that really is out of our, out of control.
okay.
So that brings up an interesting point. It's something Dave,
Talking about this, we pick up with DRI weeding. Let's see, that's my note anyway. Is it 19 minutes in? I gotta get a better headset, and I gotta get a slide, so I can just scroll, like just slide my finger along a rail instead of use the mouse.
What the annuals and perennials was done on, $5,000 in parks a month each year. We have DRI funding, so there's a replacement plan. You noticed out there this year, a lot of plans.
So what Bob Ring talks about here is they're going to go through with DRI funding and the beautification committee, and they're going to pick better plants than the wildflowers that grow 14 feet tall and then just turn into wheat. I mean, have you ever seen wildflowers? Like they look pretty when they're all in, like 90% in unison, and they're all like a field of it. You know what I mean? But like when you've got like 1, 2, 3, they look like weeds. That is a truancy. But like when you are in, and I don't even know if is truancy a word. Anyways, it is not a fallacy. There that you would have that. So what ends up happening is you get the weeds, or you get the wildflowers, and then like that's what we're supposed to have in there is wildflowers. And the problem is if you have 1 or 2, they look like weeds, and then they go to. They're in a median. It's really hot. You're inducing. If you know anything about like horticulture, a lot of wildflowers grow in fields, which are surrounded by trees, and a field is a little spot amongst like a grove, right? Like it's a little, it's not super hot. Like it gets some daytime sunshine, stuff like that. I'm sure it gets warm, but it's not like it's protected from like high winds and extreme sun. And then all of a sudden you pop a bunch of wildflowers like right next to an asphalt like road causeway, and you're like, that's replicating what it used to do. No, what's going on with a lot of wildflowers is you're growing them right next to a causeway, which is getting that sweltering heat. If you've ever tried to grow spinach in summer, spinach is like a late winter. Start it indoors in a hothouse and get it out there in the ground as soon as the ground thaws, and it'll let you, so that you can get as much as possible produced before the cool spring effect is gone and summer's sweltering heat is here, because it will not produce big leaves. It will not produce big leaves. It will produce shoots. It'll shoot right up and it'll go right to seed. The same with like radishes and other other spring and fall type produce. So essentially flowers, I mean, we might not eat them, but they're doing very similar things. They shoot right up and they turn right to wheat, which essentially is it going to seed. So it doesn't make these, it makes a pretty flower for a couple days because that's how it makes the seeds, is it makes a flower, but it starts to flower, it shoots up, makes a flower, and like there's less big tulipy type pretty flowers or leaves, you know what I mean, like it makes less foliage and it just makes a shoot. It goes right up, flowers real quick, gets pollinated, and just goes to seed, distributes its seeds, and then it just turns to hay. It turns to wheat because it just dries out and dies. It's done its job, right? It's seeded. It's done. Sent its genetic code, propagated it for the future. And that's essentially what happens like year in and year out with the roundabouts, and that's why you get the wheat up there. And I'm a novice horticulturist, so like if there's something I said there that was could be fact checked, but for the most part, I think I got a pretty good grasp on it. But yeah, no, that's so. Anyways, they're gonna pick better plants to put uptown, and that's what they're talking about with the DRI has funding and blah blah blah. And then we move forward. Oop, dag, cram it.
Make a motion to adjourn.
They're adjourning the
Second
Public
by
Safety Committee, and they're moving into Strategic Planning
All in
Board.
favor?
Ka-ching.
Okay. I'll call to order the strategic planning for Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. Let the record show that all aldermen are present, with the exception of Alderman Gonzalez, who was excused because he heard that Alderman Anastasia had attended a super spreader event and wanted to keep his distance. All right, so first up.
That's funny. I like that. I like that. For those of you who didn't see Dave at the protest uptown, where I was there, I ran into Dave up there. That must be what Alderman Crawford's referring to there. That's hilarious. Probably not why Paul Gonzalez is there. He does a lot of running events, so. But I want to go back to this. I do love the levity. I think that things like that, the little jokes, the quips, the little things, they make you realize that they're all human beings up there. We all need to talk, get along, and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not like a collusion event. It is a humorous. We might disagree on other things, but we're all here to have the civil conversation, do what's best for our community. And I think that's, I always appreciate the levity. And that was a good one out of left field. Thanks, John.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous committee meeting. Could I get a second, please? Second by Alderman Witt. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Unfinished business. We've got PL 52-21 by Alderman Witt to adopt the City of Olean employee social media policy. Alderman Witt.
Thank you. And I handed this out 2 weeks ago, or was it longer than, for folks to read over. Basically, what we did is we updated the old policy and we took from another policy, we put this together to address some of the current changes with our social media.
So I want to stop right here. We've got some upcoming elections, and I do, like I told you guys, we're going to have a guest on the show, and he's been dragging his feet. And I want to bring other people on the show that are also upcoming and do some interviews with people that are running, whether they're running opposed or unopposed. I'm not too concerned about it. We're looking for guests, and we know you guys. Obviously, if you're watching this, you're like me and you give a shit about local politics, so maybe you'd want to know your candidate. They might not be in your ward, but you want to know who represents the city, right? You might not be able to vote for them, but at the same time, you should want to know who, you know, your ward is one of 7. Well, that's 7 votes. So you could get, you know what I mean? Like, if you got 6 other wards that are just like doo-doo, like, you should know that. So you should know each and every one of the players at the table. So anyways, speaking of, which would probably be one of the easiest ones to get on the show, would be Alderman Panis, because he's been on the show before, as most of you devout followers know. And he pointed this out to me the other day. The social media policy. Linda is very, and I've pointed this out on the show as well. Linda is very sneaky, is a direct quote from Alderman Panis. He call her out in the meeting. She constantly is saying that this is. Let's back this up real quick. 21 minutes and 30. We're going back 30 seconds, folks.
For Tuesday, September 20. Unfinished business, we've got PL
Listen to her wording.
52-21 by Alderman Witt to adopt the City of Olean employee social media policy. Alderman Witt.
Thank you. And I handed this out 2 weeks ago, or was it longer than, for folks to read over. Basically, what we did is we updated the old policy.
We don't have an old policy. You didn't update crap. You guys took something that was presented at a meeting, because right now the city has a computer use policy, right? Like, don't watch porn at work, don't check your private email at work, don't use the city computers to I'm drawing a blank, but go back, I don't know, I'm a child of the the 90s. I was born in the late 80s, so when I was in high school, freshman year, I remember being on a computer in a computer lab, and you could go to newgrounds.com and play quick little games. You know what I mean? You just mess around, right? So that don't play games on city computers. Okay, that's the policy. It's more or less cover your ass policy. We don't want you to we don't want to have to have somebody question a city computer and then investigate it and find your porn collection on a city computer. That would be a no-no. We're not the SEC. It's cover your ass stuff, and that's what it is. And it's don't check Facebook from your city computer, yada yada yada. And okay, that makes sense. That is not a social media policy. That is a computer use policy, and Linda wouldn't know the difference. So.
Took from another policy, we put this together.
No, you didn't even combine it with the computer. The computer use policy is an independent policy, and it will remain an independent policy all through this. And this is we're going to get into the civilian review board, and that actually won't get me as heated tonight as this social media policy. And it isn't even Linda's words that are going to get me heated tonight.
Address some of the current changes with our
I have
social
to get the hard
media.
liquor out.
And this came about
Lose over
because
shots.
someone that used to be an alderman made some comments on social media, and it kind of spearheaded these changes. And if you read through it, basically it puts more accountability on our employees. It also tells, lets our employees know that if anything, they're responsible for what they say on social media because of their employment. And anything that could impact the city, the reliability, pretty much anything. And it also addresses, personal responsibility and ethics with social media. Also, compliance. For instance, if they do something that violates the city's IT resources or communication systems and the policies in place, it violates the city's employee handbook and any standards of conduct, which those policies are in place.
What are we in college? I remember being in high school and they started putting this crap in the the student handbook, right? You should be a good student and you will not commit crimes outside of school. So if some kid got caught smoking a cigarette or smoking a joint outside of the school grounds, they could also see detention in school. High schools did it less than colleges did. But still, that's nonsense. You're already being punished because clearly you were ticketed by an officer of the law. This is called double jeopardy. This is an egregious behavior. It is egregious for some other organization to think that they have higher valor than our justice system to do the judicial review that is bestowed upon our judicial system to handle, and they're better than them, and so they're not going to punish you enough. This isn't double jeopardy. This is completing the original Jeopardy. Like, no, screw you. That's what this is, and it's mounting. You wait.
Also engaged in an unlawful harassment or discrimination in violation of the city's policies.
Well, harassment's a crime. Discrimination's a crime if you can prove what it discriminates against, right? Like, I discriminate against how I drink my coffee, as everybody else does. Do you discriminate against the plain bagel versus the bagel with butter? Or what about the butter with butter and cream cheese? Or what about the one that just has cream cheese? I mean, that's a discrimination as well. I mean, I guess it depends, right? So when you're talking about discrimination, is it like I was super mean to this guy because of the color of his skin? Then no, okay, now I get that. Now, should the city be punishing for that? They're not at work. Anyways, and I'm not advocating that people have these kind of biases either. That's not the point. The point is that, like, this is a free country. People can do what the hell they want, right? Like, they can believe in whatever religion they want to outside of work. They have to. A religion is a deep founded thing too, so they can bring their religion with them, because that it makes them who they are as a person, and they can go from place to place carrying those beliefs and values, right? The same thing happens with these anti-racists now, right? Or the non-racists, or whatever the new terminology is, because it's all bogus. It's all actually racism. So if you take that, or you even just mix it with the person who is a racist, right? Like, they can be sitting there with these racist thoughts in their head and beliefs, and that's their beliefs. Like, you can't make them lose their job because they're racist. If they act on it and they, like, you know, they treat other workers like garbage because of their race or something. Yeah, okay. At work, that's appropriate. Like, because now they're acting on something that is a cultural norm to be violated. Okay, I can get that, but as long as they're not, you know, spreading hate towards their fellow workers, I don't see. Now they're going to start defining hate, and this is where you go down this slippery slope. You know what I mean? Like, and
So we try to update it, but also hit all the pertinent areas. And that being said, that's basically
policy's
what
still
we did.
there.
And I just want to open it up to see if anybody has any questions.
Most policies are
And
approved
just
by the
to,
mayor. You don't have to bring them in front of the council. The council can do it.
A lot of the comments and the suggestions came from our diversity and inclusion committee.
Which we've also
But
critiqued.
as you know, they don't make policy, they just suggest things to us.
Great,
some of
Linda.
these
Thank you. Now you're toting the party line. That's why they're there. They're an advisory committee. Now, if you had the fortitude to go back and tell them that they're just an advisory committee, we don't write policy. Well, why are we here? Like, because you don't write policy. I don't know what to tell you, lady. Oh, there we go. How's that? There, yeah.
If you have any questions.
I have some comments and questions. I was hoping the mayor would be here, so hopefully someone here can answer my questions.
I pay attention to a lot of details, not just because my boss's boss is the guy in question, right? But when we reviewed the Diversity Inclusion Committee from last week? Oh, it was the week before. In 2 weeks, I will not be in town. So that, like, tomorrow, or from this meeting, so the 21st, the 22nd would have been a Diversity Inclusion Committee meeting. So 2 weeks prior to that, he mentioned, while his wife was in the car, zooming into the meeting that he was driving the car of, the mayor mentioned that he would not be in town. He'd be at NICOM. So I was hoping the mayor was going to be here tonight. anyways, just throwing that out there. And people's memory fade. And he's mentioned it in previous meetings. Is, you know, like if he remembered everything that was discussed in every single meeting, his wife would question his mental remembering of things, or however he placed it. And see, like that, like I remember everything. I'm like, people accuse me of being Robin Williams sometimes with the amount of like crazy crap and like crap I remember and stuff like that.
I went and researched social media policies for companies 2019 to 2021, and pretty much the same 5 companies stood at the top, and within their social media.
This is how I have proof that Vernon wrote this. 23 minutes and 30 seconds in. I researched social media policies from the top 5 companies. No other alderman is researching social media policies prior to the social media policy being presented by Linda Witt. Unless you wrote it, handed it to your wife, she presented it to the Diversity Inclusion Committee, at which point Linda Witt is the last standing alderman there that would bring it forward to the Common Council, at which point it would then be, again, in front of you, alderman. That's how I know he wrote this, because he's passionate about it, and apparently, we'll find this out here shortly, he must watch the show. He watches this show. This one right here. Don't tell anybody.
The policies, they also incorporated information security policies, code of conduct policies, confidentiality policies, and sexual harassment, which I think the diversity committee did pretty good with implementing most of those. What I did want to know was, one, you know, when you hear this one section here, section 2,
Wait for it.
personal use of social media, there's a section here in the second paragraph where it says it is recommended that they include a disclaimer. I'm not sure if that even works. You can put a disclaimer from the city, and I'm pretty sure you can still be held liable. So I don't know if that particular.
It wasn't brought up at all during the Diversity Inclusion Committee. It was based on the previous information I've presented. Most likely Vernon wrote this entire thing. So, he wrote it and copied and pasted in this disclaimer thing, or maybe he didn't, or he didn't notice it when it got rewritten by the labor attorneys and the city attorney and whoever else contributed to the document before them. But there's a disclaimer. There's a disclaimer which I, on this show, have talked about over and over, that I am content because I've read their policy that's being presented, and it says state the disclaimer, which I think the disclaimer came from the labor attorneys, at which point I think even just keeping it there, even if they remove it from the presented legislation, still makes its argument. But I don't see how a disclaimer can still not make you liable. Well, that would mean that I'm lying, and all I'm doing here is presenting my opinion. So, if he's in fact referring to me, because libel, you can be liable, or then there's libel, right? So I guess I would have to know what he's referring to. Liable is like, if I hit somebody with my car, I would be liable for the damages. I didn't lie, I just was, liable for the damages. Now, if I, instead of slandering somebody, hurting their reputation, and I created lies, and I spoke those lies, and it was knowledgeable, right? Like, hey, I heard that Judy hits her kids, right? Like, and I don't like that. Well, I said something that I heard, and then I stated my opinion. Well, I heard it. You got to prove that I lied and said, that I didn't actually hear it. You know what I mean? There's a lot. You know what I mean? Like, there's some. You have to do some real deep digging, and it's hard to prove that kind of stuff. But anyway, so if I heard something and then I say, based on that information that I've heard, which a lot of stuff is heard knowledge, you would then say, well, like, he lied because Judy doesn't hear her kids. Well, then you got to prove it, and he's just stating his opinion on it because he heard it, and rumors spread. Like, you would have to get him, you'd have to say, I know for a fact that Judy beats her kids, and I have no evidence. Well, then that is slander, because now I am slandering her reputation, versus me just saying it. I'm not constituting as a fact. I'm saying that I heard it, which is a true fact, that I heard something, right? Like, if I actually heard it, then I heard it, right? Somebody says, hey, Judy beats her kids, and I say, Judy beats her kids, and then I use, you know what I mean? I say that. It gets dicey. We're getting to the weeds a little bit here, but if I put it in writing now, if I just said, I know for a fact Judy beats her kids, and all I did was hear it from somebody who's an unreliable source or unverifiable source, I said, I know for a fact, a positive fact, that she beats her kids, and then I write it into a newspaper article, and then I publish it. Now it's in writing for all the world to see, which essentially is most of social media. I would be liable. I could be sued for libel, which essentially is the written form of slander. Either way, neither of which. This is my personal opinion. That disclaimer is gold, because it's true. I'm entitled to my opinion. I am entitled to the First Amendment rights. The First Amendment rights were presented so that the government could not infringe on people's religion. They could not infringe on people's freedom of speech or the freedom of press to speak out and critique the government, whether it was federal, state, or local government, without fear of retribution, retaliation from said government. And it might seem like a gray area because I work for a certain government that I'm also critiquing. It should not. It should not be a gray area at all, for the simple fact that I do not shed, I think I brought this up before, the Tinker versus Des Moines, the kids that wore armbands, black armbands to school to protest this Vietnam War. Students do not, the majority opinion was that students do not shed their rights at the schoolhouse gates, right? Everybody has their rights no matter where they travel, unless they travel outside of this country, at which point certain rights will travel with you, but I can't guarantee the rest of them, and I don't think this country tries to, but we can't. You're in the United States. I do not shed my I do not shed certain rights. I do not shed a lot of rights entering into my place of employment, especially. I'm allowed to my opinion, and I can critique the government, especially because its decisions and its decisions affect my life, my children's lives, my tax dollars. It affects a lot of different things that go on in my community, the place that I call home. It affects my neighbors. So I can more than certainly express my opinions, and that's what this channel does. This channel expresses my opinions, and so we went through with said disclaimer, which I believe is why all of a sudden it's being brought up now, is because I brought it up, and this is why I'd like to thank one of our newest viewers, Alderman Robinson, to the show. Thank you for watching. I hope you've subscribed so that you get the notifications every time we go live, and we have new content, so that you can review it, watch it, because we do appreciate it. I try not to, when I'm critiquing, I try not to call out or try to make this. I like to have discussions with people, and I always will. I like to have conversations with people and discuss different things. And then, even if we disagree, I like to continue to be able to go grab a beer or a coffee with somebody afterwards and talk differently, or you know what I mean, or not be able to have such an intense discord and be like, hey, let's go watch a football game or whatever. Like, I'm easygoing guy. But right now, I almost feel like this entire legislation is a direct attack against me from people that can't do what I do, that can't have a civil conversation and not hold a grudge. That's how I feel this is. So if I get a little testy, I'm sorry to the viewers out there that are remaining like I normally would and being civil. But to everybody else, I'll still, and here's the thing is, at the end of the day, I'll still have a coffee or a beer with whoever, because I'm Kevin motherfucking Doherty. And that's just how it is. Let's continue.
Be there. And then,
COVID.
what paragraph is this? In section 3, paragraph 2, employees are prohibited from using social media to harass, threaten, discriminate, or disparage employees or anyone associated with or doing business with the city. This is already happening, so I was curious. I wanted to find out from someone, what do we do in this situation? Who's responsible for, doing an investigation, finding out the whole process. That's what I was looking for. How does this process work, and whether or not that process will work well with this policy before we pass it.
Okay.
So we're going to repeat this section, and I try not to repeat for the fact that most of you guys don't listen past an hour, if any of you do. I know people get bits and pieces. People share little tidbits of my show on other social media platforms, and then they just watch those little segments. Apparently, I'm drawing quite a crowd. But I'm going to repeat this section because I'm being accused of harassment. I know that he's saying this is happening. I don't know any other city employee. I know a pile of city employees, and I know a bunch of them are on social media for family and stuff like that. Some of them are just completely off of it because they don't want to deal with the bullshit like this that I'm going through. But I don't give a shit because I am on uncharted waters. I like that term. I coined it from a friend of mine. You know who you are. I'm on uncharted waters, and I've always been a pirate of uncharted waters. I've always been the person pushing forward in these unspoken things. And I guess we'll have to speak about them, right? Won't we? And especially when, like, so if I would dare to say that I'm probably the only city employee that actually has a YouTube channel and that does this. So, if these are the facts, and I'm correlating these things together, then I can come with the assumption, see, notice my wording there, the assumption that these comments must be directed towards me, which is not concrete evidence because no one's coming out and saying it. So I'm not holding anybody liable for such things. But I would like to point out that these do sound like fighting words. These do sound like cannonballs being fired across my bow. And I would like to point this out as I go forward. So we're gonna drop this back 25 minutes and 10 seconds into the council meeting. Oh,
Policies for
crash ram it. Hold on.
3, Paragraph 2, employees are prohibited from using social media to harass, threaten, discriminate, or disparage employees.
Back 10 seconds.
Paragraph 2, employees are prohibited from using social media to harass, threaten, discriminate, or disparage employees or anyone associated with or doing business with the city.
Okay, so based on my assumption, I am harassing, discriminating. There was another one in there. And or something else against city employees, which I guess an alderman would be a city employee because technically they do get a W-2. I was one. I got my W-2 for my $3,500 a year volunteer ship. So they are city employees, but this is after hours. And I'm critiquing the local government. So this is where your gray area comes back into play. Now, I don't see how anything that I'm doing here is harassing a public official, which is also another layer to this onion that we've unfolded here. Everybody in this room, for the most part, is a public official, whether elected or appointed. They are public officials. So to critique the public officials, which are entitled to be critiqued under the freedom of the press, which I do believe a YouTube channel that critiques council meetings would be the press. Somewhere over in my bag, I have a press badge from the Universal Life Church because I am an ordained minister through them, and because the freedom of the press and freedom of the religion run us like to one another, and they have religious newsletters and things like that. They're entitled to press rights as well. I have myself one of those as well, so I could also show that. Regardless of that fact, what do we do? Like, what harassment is happening? What discrimination? What abuse is happening? You don't like my words. Is that what is hate speech? Because you don't like my words? It's not based on anything other than personal attacks. It's not based. It isn't. There's no proof. There's no proof that there are personal attacks against me, but there's also no proof that I am doing any harassing. I've already had a team of lawyers look this over. My channel should move to TikTok too. I think TikTok would like my channel. Anyways, let's continue on.
This is already happening.
It's happening
So,
now.
I was curious. I wanted to find out from
Apparently.
someone, what do we do in this situation? Who's responsible for, doing an investigation?
Unless he's stating that it's happened past tense. Now, this is a new revelation here. Pointing out that during the Chauvin trial, I said justice for Chauvin on a Facebook post, and it put everybody into a tizzy and created this policy. It's already happened. I still think the fact that he's bringing up the disclaimer when no one else brought it up, and it was introduced months prior, and it's just being brought up now, that he clearly watched the show. But the justice for Chauvin thing wasn't I don't think he did it. I do think he did it. I think, you know what I mean? Like, it was I was sick and tired of watching the news on every other channel and it saying, there's no reason to send a man to trial. He should be put to death We saw the YouTube video. We saw the Facebook post. We saw the social media post. If I said something on this show, or I did something on this show, or whatever, you don't get to just put a man to death for that, or a woman, or whoever. You don't get to put somebody to death based on footage. This is America. This is the United States of America. This is where we have freedoms, and those freedoms are inalienable. And we are entitled to a fair hearing. That means sequestering a jury, which didn't happen. We held it at ground zero. That's like if you tried, clearly, Saddam, Osama bin Laden, orchestrated 9/11. That's like you trying him at a trial in downtown New York City, like on the site of the World Trade Center, and you call the jury of his peers the residents of New York City. Like, well, that's called a witch burning. Like, now he's not a U.S. citizen, so he's not afforded such rights. But at least in my opinion, you got to be a U.S. citizen to be get the most basic of all inalienable rights, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you're not a U.S. citizen, you're not entitled to any of that. But then we signed the Geneva Convention, so we follow certain other rules that I didn't sign them. So, but you could go on with a lot of these little dictates. And so here's what happens: is you turn around and you have this trial that, whatever. Like, so I just posted justice for him, because he's entitled to it. Doesn't matter if it's he allowed the scene from American Gangster where Denzel Washington walked up to that guy in the middle of the street and just blasted him in the forehead with a revolver or a pistol. I think it was an M1911. Anyways, I could be off, and it may. Why did I think it was pearl plated? Anyway, inconsequential information. It doesn't matter if that's what happened and you caught it on tape in the cinematic quality that Hollywood does. You still get a goddamn trial. This is America. This is America. That's why I said that. And all of a sudden it's, Kevin Doherty must be a racist. Kevin's discriminating against an entire race of people. And I'm assuming that's where he's going with this, if he is, in fact, referring to me, which I have no evidence of, but I'm just making these assumptions based on the fact that the social media policy. Now, if we went back to rate that video, where the Diversity Inclusion Committee met that following week after my post, when the mayor's office got flooded with phone calls, I got called into multiple people's offices, and then they sat there and called me out by name. When I was an alderman, I wasn't allowed to use people's names as employees. We weren't allowed to say, "Oh yeah, Jim does a great job coaching the kids softball," or so and so does a great job mowing the fields, or so and so does a great job. Unless you're honoring somebody, like. We reviewed the meeting 2 days ago. Is Mr. Buchanan over at the water filtration? They're honoring him, right? Like that's acceptable. But if you, because you're giving him an award or a certificate or something, you have that ability. But if you said like, well, so and so is the handles payroll or handles receipting the parking tickets, or handles birth certificates, or handles police records, or handles dispatch cable, and you start naming people that do jobs at the city, that was a no-no. We weren't allowed to do that in any meeting. Even before I started recording them, we weren't allowed to do that, because they would have to be put into the minutes, and then the city could be sued. Now we're bringing them up all the time. Since I've been gone, they've been bringing them up all the time. And my name was brought out, and then during that same meeting, I don't know why Kevin Doherty would act this way. I have his daughter, Quinn, in my class. I don't think teachers are supposed to name students in her class believe that's a HIPAA violation or some sort of regulation. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure we could find out. But I'm not one to do such an egregious thing like sue a teacher that didn't know that, you know, blah blah blah. But I'm just pointing it out there. If we're going to make personal attacks against people and say that I discriminated against a whole race of people because I said you have to have justice, you do. You have to have justice for everybody. Everybody is entitled. Now, if somebody takes justice into their own hands, they're still entitled to justice. That is the non-discriminatory portion of our country. They took something out of the hands of justice and into their own hands, and now they will pay justice for that. That is, and that's what's happening here. People are taking justice into their own hands and trying to crucify me. And I'm not going to stand for it. I'll still have a coffee with every one of these people that is doing this. I will have a beer with every one of these people that is trying to bury me. But guess what? Because I'm the bigger person. But I will also sit there and not state my opinion. I will still continue to state my opinion, regardless who my employer is. I feel like a Gloria Gaynor song about to come on. I will survive. You cannot abolish dissenting opinion. I would like to let everybody else know that Clarence Thomas makes most of his career on that. Him and Thomas Sowell, and I've mentioned this on the channel before, both of them should be Nobel Peace Prize winners for both their work in justice, Clarence Thomas, and his interpretation of the United States Constitution and his duties thereof as a Supreme Court justice, as well as Thomas Sowell for his amazing works in economics, which I feel like he makes economics feel like the entire world can be solved by economics. It is, he brought where I didn't think faith could be in capitalism. I have found faith in capitalism. Like, I was already a faithful capitalist, but he made it almost a religion, if you will. And yeah, no, it's amazing work from both of them. Anyways, we've gone off on a huge tangent, and as I told you, and holy shit, we're only 25 minutes into this.
The whole process, that's what I was looking for. How does this process work, and whether or not that process will work well with this policy before we pass it.
Okay. One of the things I failed to mention is our city attorney and our labor attorney both looked at this because
They
of the
reviewed it.
wording
Yep.
and to look within our,
We're gonna skip ahead. We're gonna put this in overdrive, folks. So I've got notes. We'll make them, and then we'll go from there.
sorry, I was asking that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have no idea what it is.
Sorry?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Just curious. Okay, so I think until we get those questions asked, we'll just, again, postpone this.
Let's postpone it, and
Questions,
then a minute later, the disclaimer argument's brought up again.
Within the union contract or whatever, right? Okay. And then the second question was our existing code of conduct? No, I'm sorry, what was the second question?
We would just like a copy of the existing code of conduct. And the other part you asked about, Vern, was confidentiality, right?
Yeah, the disclaimer, they recommended that you include the disclaimer. I'm pretty confident that regardless of the disclaimer or not, I mean, I can sit here and say, you know, I reserve the right to have my views, blah, 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 and then turn around and say something bad, and I'm guaranteed that I'll still get in trouble. So, then that's why I'm thinking that, you know, that particular line, it kind of gives a falsehood, you know, if someone just says, you know what, I put a disclaimer in, what else do you want? You know, that
I think the disclaimer, even if you remove it from the policy, I think it supersedes your policy.
doesn't excuse you at all. So I think to cover ourselves, to make sure, we should probably eliminate that line. But then Alderman Crawford brought up a good point. If this particular thing will revert back to disciplinary policy, then maybe we should see that too. Prior to.
Well, once you get there first, discipline policy goes, the entire city is union, so you're gonna be
No.
talking about.
Now they're talking about disciplinary policy. They're going to open up the union.
Disciplinary procedures.
Can of worms.
that, the contract has, and it's gonna go progressive discipline.
And then they also talk about the charter.
Amongst
And
union reps, union
so-
lawyers versus city
Yeah, we're not
lawyers.
looking to change it. So we're just looking at it. I mean, have you read any of it? Do you know?
No, I don't know
Okay,
what
so
discipline policy is.
before we can say, yes, this policy is going to work, we don't know if it's going to work or not because we don't know the policies and procedures that they're.
31 minutes and 30 seconds in. Perfect.
So do I need a motion to postpone? Or just, okay, I'll make a motion to postpone to our
There it is,
next.
postponed finally again. Then at 33 minutes, we do a
Dead trees all over the place, and there are
33 minutes.
about kind of a greater vision of a citywide tree replacement plan. And maybe this is something we can kick to the tree board, but, you know, there are dead trees all over the place. And there are, as you know, there's dangerous trees, although we do a really good job of keeping them.
I'd like to state I am big in on Alderman, former Alderman Nathaniel Smith's proposal on trees. Trees have no place near my home. Trees block wind and sun, which save roofs, but trees also ruin roofs. They destroy foundations. They destroy. They create harborage for critters. According to a former community development director or a coordinator, they increase property values, which I've yet to see any evidence thereof. I'm not a big fan of trees. They destroy sidewalks. They destroy subways. The subway is the area from the sidewalk, from your side of the house, the side of the sidewalk to the curb. And then there's this little grassy knoll in between that was guaranteed to the utility companies as safe harborage for their utilities, and then we just started like planting trees there. Like we guaranteed you a nice little safe harborage, and we just gave it cancer at the same time. I think trees don't have a place in subways either. If people want to plant subways on their yard and it fucks up their sewer, that's on them. If it fucks up their gas main going to their house, they can pay for that. I don't think it should be on the utility companies. I don't think that there's dead trees everywhere. So I'm a big proponent of trees. I don't think the city needs to be a tree city. I mean, we have parks. The parks can have trees, right, for shade and things like that. But you don't live in a city to live in the country. It's pretty self-explanatory. Anyways, let's continue on.
But
I'd also like to remind everybody that my opinions on stuff, you don't have to agree with all of them. You can agree with some of them. You can agree with very vaguely, grasps at some of them, or you can agree with none of them or all of them. I don't care. I want to let you guys know that these are just my opinions, and if you agree with me more, then subscribe, like, and don't forget to do that for the channel. And
the past couple of months, I've had a constituent on West State Street
complain about the dead trees in front of their properties, and they're talking about replanting trees. So let's see here, and then they go literally for like 10 minutes about this. So 41 minutes and 30 seconds in.
The waste management plan is laid out. That's how the contract was written this year, and then some things that are gonna stay the same. So if you take.
We'll grab another beverage. I'll be right back.
That's marked up, compare with the code, I've highlighted the sections that we're gonna kind of address. The first one is obviously really simple, it's just a definition. tote system, since the code is very specific on how like the waste management plan is laid out. Secondly, is rules and regulations, so it is regulated by the common council, the waste management plan. Thirdly, materials subject to recycling, I've attached a recycling plan. That hasn't changed, just so you all know. It's still zero sort recycling, the same items that are recyclable. So we kept that in the contract. There's been a lot of changes in that market, but luckily we were able to stick with that without any really major increases in fees. Moving on kind of quickly, we'll have to add something about the totes program, and I kind of wrote a narrative. I'm just going to kind of mark up the code, and then of course, you know, Jack has to read and write and sign off on the final action. But
They talk
you
about
know,
fee
I think
schedule.
that the section, there's
Sorry,
section
guys.
on
I
the sticker
didn't mean to
system,
make you just listen
since
to.
we're now doing, you know, a quote unquote hybrid system, which would be the monthly program for the tote system. I wrote in there like a wheeled refuse collection tote. So we have.
So 44 minutes and 15 seconds in, you caught the gist of the first part.
So this has been discussed every time we've talked to the council.
Containers for
Property
refuse.
maintenance
So right here, he talks about DPW director talks about how it's in the property maintenance code that all refuse must be put in cans. I think he referenced at some point about like you can't have it on the side yard of a house if it's an exposed side yard. So like a corner house, you couldn't have it on the like you're not allowed to keep your trash cans there. I would say you can't stack garbage there. I don't know if I agree with that. If you listen to how he speaks about the code in this section, and I'll let you guys delve back into this because we're trying to cut this short. We're already at an hour and 15 minutes. And we still have like an hour to go left of this hour and 50-minute meeting. So what ends up happening is he has the refuse contract. So you if the code describes you putting water, you need a waterproof, bug-proof, like stink-proof container. Like essentially that's what the goal is, and they describe it in slightly different way, but they essentially don't want you to be able to put trash in it, seal it up, and rodents and other animals can't get into it, and bugs can't get out of it or into it, and it doesn't stink, and it's not unsightly, and mangy dogs can't just tear your bags open, and that's acceptable to me. I get that. Everybody should have a garbage container. Oh, you can't afford a garbage container. Well, then you can't afford get rid of your garbage. So I mean, like, there's a lot of different things. So but if you say, hey, I accept that, but I don't want to get rid of but like my garbage cans are on the side of my house. I'm on a corner house, and they sit over on the far end of the fence, and the garbage guys come and they open the door and they grab the toters out and they pull them away. Like that's what it is. Like one's recycling, one's garbage, and then they take them. Like that's how it works. So I don't agree with that portion of the code, and apparently it's already a code that's not enforced. So, and then they discuss that here in this section here, and then at 5 minutes and 45 seconds in, they discuss something that I'm not a huge fan of.
So we're giving them a little slack, but we also want to make it clear that that's not acceptable.
Can I ask a question? I've seen that there's another company that has the green totes out. So if we have an exclusive contract, we'll just go with Casella.
So they have an exclusive contract, but they haven't made a change in the code to make it exclusive. In terms, they need to change the code to make the garbage contract, they need to make it so that you can't use the code to write, like you can't be another garbage contractor in the city if this contract is in effect, essentially. And we already have licensed other contractors in the city, and you can't. I'm a capitalist. I'm not going to tell people that they can't operate. I don't like monopolies, and I think that this socialist mentality affects capitalism, and that's how you lose innovation. That's how you do not become competitive, because once you make it exclusive, like, who are you gonna call? Waste Management doesn't even offer contracts in our area anymore, because they would have to rebuy a facility. You need a brick and mortar facility nearby, and they're not nearby enough to do our area, and so they hardly bid the contract. If they bid it at all, I haven't even seen the bids. I don't know. You can't, like, I don't know. I'm sure I could foil for them, but so you're getting local companies devouring, and like, you got one local company, not even local. They're local, but they're main based out of Vermont. Like, eating up local companies, and that's still not going to stop the fly-by-nighters. Like, stopping by people's house and be like, "Hey, listen, I'll charge you $5 a month. I'll come by your house. You know, even 20 to $50 a month, and I'll stop by your house and do this or that or whatever." But it is what it is. So, anyways, and then actually, this is where I write.
Costello, but will they still be allowed if people choose to use them, or they wouldn't be allowed to be in the city?
You know, if that goes through,
I think the
have to
argument's
use our
grasped.
contract, which, from what I understand, is quite a bit less in cost than Beekner, who I think you're speaking about. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be 100%. The benefits of it, at least from my perspective, is one, you don't have another garbage truck driving around on all your roads for a couple of reasons.
Another garbage truck driving on the roads. I think that's grasping.
They're heavy, they beat up the roads, they cause traffic congestion, and they, you know, if you want to, pollute, so they're driving around every day. Casella, who is going to be along the route anyways, you know, if we direct people towards them, the cost is going to be less because the truck is already there, and then you also only have that one inconvenience of that one pickup route.
And this doesn't impact the yard-based pickup, that'll still be part of the contract?
That's still part of the contract. And
So-
light goods pickup.
Okay.
Oh, 49 minutes in. Here's where the side yards comes up. I knew we wanted to reference it.
which may accumulate. Containers must be rodent-proof and insect-proof and watertight, and must be kept covered at all times.
That next sentence is important too.
All right, such containers must not be kept in a front yard or exterior side yard except for the day of collection as determined by the collections schedule set forth by the Department of Public Works.
So my backyard is my
So
side
from now
yard.
on, when I get calls, I can direct them to call code enforcement, is that correct? That's who manages this code?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
You don't manage it, right?
No.
Okay, then I can, okay.
Now I'm going to
very
keep
good.
refuse in the garage, where
I have
it's bug-proof,
They've been told
but more
by
likely to smell in a garage
they
where
can't have
outside
their bags out there the day before.
it dissipated the air before it came in contact with anybody. And you get near a trash can, you're like, oh, it stinks a little bit, but this is how dumb stuff is.
I mean, select neighborhoods, ours in particular, we have a problem with skunks, you know, and.
Shoot them, John.
They're-
You can kill a nuisance animal very easily.
They come in, whip those bags right open.
All right, anyways.
faultless.
52 minutes and 15 seconds. I wrote the word local number. Oh.
When we meet with them, we had changed the language in the contract
So
to
what-
strengthen it.
He talks
Originally,
about
it said it had to have a local number. Well, they used a local phone number and it went to like Vermont and their corporate.
Yeah, if you called Casella, it would go to a Vermont number, and then some lady at the call center would call, and then you're like, listen, I just want to talk to the lady in the local store, or the guy in the local place, and talk to them. And they're like, we can't give you access to that. So you have to drive down there, and they're like, what do you need? And you're like, I need to talk to you about this guy. And they're like, talk to the city. And then, like, they just gave you some runaround. Like, they're just garbage. I very much dislike that company. They're just leeching money out of our area to send back to Vermont and fund Bernie Sanders, that monster. He might be from Maine. I don't even give a shit. Like, I think it's Vermont. I'm pretty sure it's Vermont.
So we changed that to be, has to be a local number, local answer.
Okay, so
I
we've
think
discussed the. All right, now we're going to 53 minutes and
With
15
all
seconds.
aldermen are present except for
Calls.
Alderman Gonzalez.
Calls the committee of the whole. And then we really don't get any meat. We talk about the CRB is how we open up, and then 55 minutes and 30 seconds in, come on, Kevin. You gotta get past your own
I
time.
got a quick, you want,
I just have a quick
She talks
question.
about the
I
matrix.
read through all of these, and you see,
Which essentially is the list of rules. And she goes, I wonder if they're given the matrix, so if they know what the rules are and why they were created and what things they should follow. And she says, and I say, and I wrote here as a note, it should be, but never is. Like almost nobody understands a lot. True, like even when you become an alderman, you have a rough idea, and then it's more or less like you kind of show up to meetings until you figure the fuck out. Like that's kind of how it works. The zoning board, they go to some trainings. I don't know what their trainings entail. I was never on the zoning board. But I mean, it's essentially what it is. I mean, like even like until somebody sits down and does research and follows the rules, you really don't know what like your responsibility is. So, anyways.
you could bring up the matrix
And they talk about that until 1 minute or 1 hour 3 minutes. And just 3 minutes. 1 hour and 3 minutes, roughly.
the other policies that we've looked at. So the board shall have the power to receive, investigate, hear, make findings, and take action upon complaints by members of the public, including employees of the OPD, or any city of Olean governmental agency or department against members of the police department that allege police misconduct, period. Feedback on that, comments, thoughts?
Initially, John, I'm curious, and maybe a definition of terms comes into play with this kind of legislation, but when we just say take action, you know, how does that direct us on what that action is? You know, I mean, if they're limited to just recommendations to the police chief of their opinions, can we say things like as broad as just take action?
I'm concerned about that.
Thank you.
From a policy perspective.
It just says take action. Thank you, Jason Panis. Alderman Jason Panis.
Perspective. But I
Jack
believe
Hart.
you're going to run into some problems if the board is actually imposing punishment given the legal stuff that's operating in the city and the unions.
I mean, to me, it would seem more effective for a board like this to just be a civilian view or opinion
So I
on
recommend-
matters in the police department, right? So,
I recommend everybody to watch 1 hour 3 minutes in until about 1 hour and 10 minutes in. It's about a good 7 minutes of Jason and the board going back and forth and talking about how we need to increase transparency. So if this board was to be transparent and say, hey, listen, and actually no, almost to the rest of the meeting, right? So
they publish their findings in some way.
they publish their findings. So he builds the foundation here at about 1 hour and 11 minutes and 15 seconds in, right? This is, I have to stop and make a quick argument here.
And then in there, it discusses basically what you're looking for in police reform groups, and it gives one method or one viewpoint, and then the next paragraph gives you a contrast and gives you another viewpoint. But when you read it, something that I always love to let people know, especially around here, when I hear a lot of times, and no offense, Chief, when people say that those types of things don't happen around here, it says right here, studies show, this is a quote, studies show that white Americans are far more likely than black Americans to believe that the police use an appropriate amount of force. So with that fact, I look at things from a different perspective from everyone else. So when you read this and it goes on.
So again, I'm going to repeat because this can seem confusing. So I'm going to bloop bloop.
65.
Okay.
Contrast and give you another.
So, what is stated there is this is a fact that majority of white Americans, anyways,
But when you read it, something that
majority of white people think that there isn't a problem here, and announced to the less likely Black Americans, African Americans, don't think there is a problem, think that there's a problem, and white people don't think there's a problem, and that's the survey, and that's fact. I'll give them that, right? That there's a survey out there that says that majority of white people think that there's not a problem here, and majority of black people think there's a problem. That does not mean that's an illusion answer, right? That doesn't tell you that there's. Where's the survey that says there's actually a problem? Where's the evidence that there's a problem, right? Like, okay, so let's re-listen to that.
I always love to let people know, especially around here, when I hear a lot of times, and no offense, Chief, when people say that those types of things don't happen around here, it says right here, studies show, this is a quote, studies show that white Americans are far more likely than black Americans to believe that police use an appropriate amount of force. So, with that fact, what is an appropriate amount of force? There is not a survey or statistic or fact that presents what the appropriate amount of force is. We're just going off of people feel, white Americans feel that they use the appropriate amount of force, which is less likely than black Americans to think that they're using the appropriate amount of force. What are those amount? Like, that's what I'm wondering. What is an appropriate amount of force? That's a subjective number, so it's a subjective statistic based on that. So with these facts, I feel like we're getting into a real South Park Chewbacca argument. If Chewbacca's from Chewbacca is a Wookiee, and he's from Endor. But they're from Kashyyyk. Jesus, I can't even remember the quote. It's the South Park Aaron Cochrane reference. I look at things from a different perspective from everyone else. So when you read this, and it goes on, and it brings up some other information that I think is pertinent, but it will answer some of your questions to what we were just discussing, that some of the oversight entities are given the power to weigh in on pertinent policy, the requisite financial resources, and access to investigate.
So essentially, he states this this statistic, which I think is referenced in bogusness. I mean, it clearly is. It's saying that people feel this way on a subjective topic. Like, and then because of that, and because of the color of my skin, I can now relate to this. And then he reads from the document that he wrote. The policy and whatever else he's reading there, and I think that stat is bogus because it's not fictional, it is completely subjective in and of itself. Because it's based on subjectivity, it becomes subjective. And so now he's starting that, but it sounds like science, right? Like that's what we've been hearing for the last year and a half, 2 years, almost 2 years now. This is, but believe the science, right? Like it's all based on science. Well, no, but it's not based on science. It's based on subjectivity. And subjectivity is subjective, and science is not based on subjectivity. Science tries to tame the world of subjectivity and turn it into scientific theory and then to scientific law, which is no longer subjective. Because once a scientific law is proven not valid, then it is no longer law. I don't even know if it becomes theory again. It's just it's fallible. They're infallible. Like they have an infallibility to science, and they have measures which take things in and out of said world. Anyways, so 1 hour 19 minutes in, we're coming off the 12-minute mark. 16, 19 minutes and 30 seconds in.
Not
Here could be audited. You could say where is complaint 102, and what became of it. What was the answer? Who looked into it? What did they do? I mean, what does that, Vernon, does that sound like it could meet the needs of, right? It gets audited. It can't disappear. Somebody couldn't just bury it and make it go away.
So what Jason Panis has brought up is the fact that, like, this should exist, and maybe this is where I could get behind it as well. Not because Alderman Panis brought it up, but it should be audible. It should be an audited thing, right? That's what people are looking for. That's the only reason the CRB was even presented, because we want transparency. Well, okay, you want transparency, and I mentioned this in previous things, like, you want transparency. Transparency means that you have to do certain things to be transparent and not hide behind some veil, like the Wizard of Oz. You like. I like this. You let it. He goes on to say, he goes on for a good 7 minutes here.
Same time, I can see it. You should be able to write it.
26, 1 hour and 26 minutes in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a section here that talks about the board being able to establish its own mission statement, procedures, track any statistics and so on and so forth.
If
So,
there's a number.
they could make their own auditing policy.
So, if there is a number, there is an end. So that's what Jason says, and it's probably coming up.
Discussing.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily that we have to work out the details.
Sure.
But we lay the,
Right.
We lay the
create an
foundation.
auditable process for
That's
complaints to the police department, for
Right.
complaints on the police department.
May I say something about that?
Yep.
Again, the audit process is, I'm fine with that. It should be, I'm not sure that you should go to the direction that gives the board the ability to establish some mission.
So, if there is no, Jason was pointing out, if there's a number, there is an end, which means you give something a number. I file a complaint, it's got a number on it. You can say, hey, listen, what happened to complaint number, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's not, oh, so-and-so did this. Nope, it has a number. It's a certain incident I'd like to investigate. What happened to it? What was done with it? Oh, did it fall by, nothing can ever fall by the wayside, right? Like, he almost takes an accounting standpoint to it. Anyways, Jack Hart is getting into the no autonomous board policy, right? Like, there should be no autonomous board because the Common Council is the autonomous board that manages everything under it. Essentially, what the federal government did with OSHA, created an autonomous board, and now, like, the only people that can rein it in is the judicial branch. Well, thank God for the founding fathers in the judicial branch, but the problem is that we haven't had a judicial branch that is worth its testicular fortitude to actually put OSHA in its place until we're in the time that they're going to do that, because now OSHA is mandating vaccine mandates. So we'll see here with Jack, but
Elections and so forth, because it is part of city government, and the city government operates by a mayor, a county council, and it does not, we don't have any autonomous boards. I use the word autonomous, meaning they make their own rules, they do their own thing. I don't think that should happen. Actually, the other thing I want to say, there's going to be a law ultimately is going to be drafted one way or the other. It could be an amendment to the charter, or it could be a law or something. There's going to be a whole law that is going to be part of, that's going to be adopted, and that can be changed by the common council, the mayor. I mean, so they're going to be operating according to some procedures in which the common council and the mayor, once they make a decision, ultimately, have approved it. And it will always be subject to being reconsidered, just like anything else in the city.
Okay.
If you could,
No,
I can't tell if you guys can hear him or
And
not.
that's where I'm trying to find
John
a
brings up a
balance,
good point
okay,
here.
between ensuring that we have the transparency in our community, but at the same time, I don't know if I feel comfortable creating autonomous boards.
Right, as
I
you
think-
shouldn't. You should not never create a paradigm amongst your own capabilities, right? Like, nature has already done that, and that has left us with where we are, right? Like, nature has said, hey, man can think, and man can do this, and man can do that, and then we can send our genetic code forward because we are constrained by time, and we can't live forever. And so we now send our genetic code forward with our offspring, our children, and then they become the next autonomous board, essentially leaving us obsolete. And we are in this weird conundrum, right? Like, this is, okay, so I'm getting philosophical on you, but we're in this weird conundrum, like, where, like, then, you know, like, the parents take care of the child then go back to take care of the parents, and then you get onto this, but, like, with an autonomous board amongst a legislative body, like, man has never been able to grasp such concepts. So once something gets created, they never reel it back in, which is why we have centralized government, centralized federal government, and it needs to disappear. A large portion of it does, and that's where we are today. Anyways, getting back into it, let's go.
We have a structure and we have a charter. So I do agree that we're laying out how this board should act, and that also goes with Section 4, essentially having the board, or I should say number 4 here, the board having the ability to subpoena. Under the charter, this committee, this council is the only power that has the ability to subpoena.
That's who they'd be subpoenaing through. They would be subpoenaing through the common council via the city attorney.
I see.
So this is where, like, John brings up, Jack will bring something up, but I don't know if that's legal, right? Like, I guess they are authorizing them to, without authorization, be able to utilize the city attorney at their will. So it might be legal. It's just doesn't sound like you should be giving up that kind of power.
Because they don't have any subpoena power. So that would be done through the city attorney. Yeah.
You are delegating it. It's like the zoning board.
I believe there's a way to get there. I don't think that's exactly correct how it works, but there is a way to get there.
There is a loophole,
I mean,
right?
so how I would, again, this will work set, just what I would think or suggest.
All right, so we're gonna skip ahead for 45 seconds past where we are. So 1 minute and 30. Oh no, I'm sorry. We're skipping ahead like 4 minutes.
If it's that simple, I don't, without getting into examples, I don't know if it's that simple. There may be times where, let's say just, you're getting complaints an officer's rude. His behavior's just, people don't like it, right? And the chief's, whoever's way of dealing with it is just, they have a talk with them, they're gonna work on their behavior, and if they don't see improvement, they're gonna go to counseling or something, or they're gonna do something different if something don't improve. That probably doesn't come into a matrix level thing, I'm just guessing here, but if things tended to repeat and outcomes weren't changing, then I would think it would come out in reports of that committee to the council as to whether we need to make a law that dictates something
Yeah.
different.
So what do you do about a rude officer? And then we get into 34 minutes and 30 seconds.
Right?
Go ahead, 30 seconds.
Stuff Jason is saying, but we also got this so-called HR director. Wouldn't he be
So, like, all right, so I'm critiquing Dave here. What about the HR director? The HR, every committee that we've been reviewing in the last like 2 months, or council meeting or whatever, has relied a lot on this HR director, and I think that the HR director is overtaxed as it is. I don't think that you, like, everybody's like, oh, that's the HR director's job. Like, this guy is like everything. It's kind of like what people don't want the mayor to be. They're then like, well, you can't have the mayor handle all this, so let's have the HR director handle this. And it's like, why are they two different people? Why are we tasking all these responsibilities? We should task a lot of responsibilities on the person at the top. But I get that you don't want to tax the person at the top a lot because they're managing quite a bunch. But like, okay, well now you have to create another position, and Dave doesn't like spending money, and so let's not spend money. Let's just put it on the HR director. And I don't think that you're going to be able to put it on the HR director. I don't think it's plausible. I don't think there's enough time in the day for a part-time person, and as I've said in the past, I don't think you're going to be able to convince a person who signed up for the job to be part-time to then do it full-time. So, HR, you're putting too much reliance on. 37 minutes in, so we're going to go ahead a good, like, 3.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes.
This board should represent what the people of the city want their police department to be like. The chief, in reality, as things align and work out, we should want to please, as long as, if the board's not acting in some way that's like to get the police department, then it shouldn't be a problem. If that's existing, then there's a whole other problem going on. You know what I mean?
I don't really foresee that. I mean, it's kind of similar to saying, that I may have come on the board, come on this committee with an agenda. You know what I mean? I think when people
So, I'm not questioning Vernon's intent on the city council, but everybody has an agenda, regardless. Like, you have an agenda, regardless. Like, I just got in an argument with my little brother earlier. Like, every life experience you have gives you, like, a pre-notion for an agenda. And there's no reason, like, but you can't make an argument because of past experience. And so you pick a marginalized community to make up all the board members, and you say the marginalized community would have the most effect against the police department because they've been most marginalized by the police department, which would tend to make you think that they would be resentful of the police department because the police department's writing tickets and fines and can, like, you do something bad and you get punished, would, you assume that punishment would also depending on the egregiousness of the punishment, could ruin your life. Like, it, you know what I mean? Or ruin the life of a loved one, and now all of a sudden you have great resentment for the police department. So I think that in and of itself creates an additional bias that you're making it of a marginalized community. Hence I'm calling it the Board of Bias. But everybody has an agenda. Like, I don't give a shit who you are. You always have an agenda. Because guess what? I give a shit about my kids, my community, my family, my neighbors. Guess what? That's an agenda. That in and of itself is an agenda. There's no, like, I am here because I exist. Like, you might be able to make some anarchist type point onto why you have an agenda, but you have zero agenda, but it could still be broken down into an agenda. Everything's an agenda. So, because it's based on where you come from and what you believe in, blah blah blah, and that's where it comes down.
there for these positions, they're coming in with good faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know we're going with extreme, thoughts and ideas, but I don't foresee.
No. I don't see it either. 39 minutes and 30 seconds in.
So what about, you want me to reword that?
Yeah, would you read it again?
Yeah. So the board, all right, the Civilian Review Board would have the power to receive copies of complaints, the investigation that is conducted internally, all right, by your department, make recommendations to you based upon the matrix, and then have some sort of like, audit, or, I don't know, and findings or something that would get sent to maybe the mayor, after you, the police chief, not just you, the police chief, makes the final decision.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And if they don't like the police chief's final decision, what you were talking about earlier, then what's?
That's part of their process that can audit back with the mayor, okay? And if we want to say the mayor and common council, I don't know. I don't want to muddy the waters, but I think we
Sorry,
have something.
my technical
that we
directors
can,
just sat in on
But I
me.
think
build off of.
I think it'll solve itself and, each of them have an output. If they don't align,
So,
somebody's gonna
I
want
think
them
this
to
is achieving what
align. It'll probably be the mayor.
what needs to happen with the
See that there's not,
with the CRB, and I'm cool with what is being proposed here. It's a lot more neutered than what people would like, but I think that it has to be, because you can't be attacking the fundamentals of our country on certain propaganda and nonsense and ulterior motives and agendas.
Do you see any, yep, check.
Wouldn't the chief?
So they neuter it, and then
The chief is probably gonna make a decision. The decision would go to the board.
chief's part of the decision, right? Exactly. The police chief should be overseeing all the police officers. That's how it's supposed to work. Let's scroll forward. I got 44 minutes. Boom. Let's go.
If
1 hour and
the state
44
board is
minutes.
gonna make if they wanna give their input to the chief and recommendation, then, I'm fine with that.
I would think that it would be,
Oh, it's out of water.
the chief should get a recommendation before.
It's out of water. We'll have to wait.
Before he
Okay.
makes a decision, just, even if he goes.
You
a
can leave it
different
right
way,
there.
So that he can take into consideration what others have recommended.
And then that decision would be part of the tracking process, and it would be on record. So down the road, if that same situation came up again, the chief is protected. The
So-
board is like, okay, this is what we did here.
Maybe I've
that
hit the wrong
again.
point.
What are
Okay.
we gonna do
Yeah.
now?
So continuing to neuter it right through that point.
It has to be a
Which is
correct-
fine. This is what people want. People want the transparency. I think that is the big portion here. They want transparency to make sure that their thoughts aren't forgotten as civilians, and which is a good point. But I don't think to attack the police department and create some autonomous board makes this necessary for anybody to create such a thing, such a monstrosity, such a Frankenstein monster. So anyways, at 1 hour and 49 minutes in, we go into a discussion about categories.
What I found out after going back and looking at the charter,
And
we have standing committees.
he's talking
we
about-
have subcommittees / boards.
He's reading the charter
we have
now.
Special committees and advisory committees.
Not too many people read the charter, so this is he must be really passionate about this, because he's going back and forth and talking about the categories, and then for the remainder of the meeting until the adjournment, he Alderman Crawford goes in, and then Jack Hart pops in and talks about what the different categories mean, and that we need to do some more research and yada yada. But regardless, I think you're going to need a charter change, because almost every committee that Alderman Robinson references, you really can't. They're in the two different categories, which is a mayoral committee appointment and a council committee appointment, which I've given in previous meetings, like how you, in my reviews and critiques, how you don't do a charter change, and point out that you can just go through and just put restrictions on what lists of candidates are presented to the mayor for mayoral appointment. So there's different ways around this, but either way, they just go back and forth about like how the charter is structured with committees, and then at the end of this, at like an hour and 53 minutes and some change, they discuss. They go into their adjournment. So without going to an executive session or anything like that,
Where is this for?
and there we go. So thanks, guys. We're just under 2 hours. Holy smokes, this is a late one. I would like to thank Uncle Tony for providing us with beverages as always, and M&Ms for the kids when they get back from seeing Uncle Tony. And then don't forget to like, subscribe, and send your hate mail here to the channel. We will see you guys on the flip flop. Pieces, deuces, let's roll.